I think I found my book soulmate. Hello strangers and story lovers, and welcome to my lair. Are my wigs getting a bit intense? Yes. Do not send help. Anyways, I'm Morgan, and today we're talking about Sunbringer by Hannah Kana, the second book in the Fallen Gods saga. If you remember, I really enjoyed God Killer, which is the first book of the saga. Really loved that one as well. So now the question is, did this hold up to my expectations? And the answer is, yeah. I loved this. I had an insanely good time reading this. Please just, do yourself a favor and read these books. They're great. Treat yourself to a good time. You deserve it. As per usual, I will start with a spoiler-free section where I will share my general thoughts, and then I will get into a spoiler zone where I will spoil absolutely everything. But do not worry, I will let you know when to leave. Let's get this started. Let's start with a quick recap of book 1. Kissen, our main character, is a god killer whose family was brutally murdered when she was a child as an offering to the fire goddess, Seth. Growing up, she became what's called a Vega, which is a person who kills God for a living. She lives in the kingdom of Midran, whose king, King Arren, has recently made the worship of gods illegal following a gruesome war in the now ruined city of Blenraden, where he lost most of his family. King Arren himself was greatly injured during said war, to the point that he basically now has a god replacing his heart, the hearth goddess Hestra. At the beginning of book 1, King Arren asks the former commander of the royal guard, his best friend called Elogast, to complete one final task for him, even though Elo is retired and is now a baker. Because you see, Arren is dying, or claims to be dying, and he needs his best friend Elogast to go to the ruined city of Blenraden, where old gods still exist, to ask a god to save his life. In the meantime, Kissen meets a young noble called Inara, who is asking for her help with a god problem. Basically, the god of white lies, Skedi, is currently using her as a shrine, and while they are friends, they kind of would like to remedy the situation, because it would be pretty convenient for dear old Skedi to have his own shrine instead of squatting in Inara like this. Kissen decides to take them both to Blenraden, hoping to find some old gods to help them, and on their way they meet Elo and they decide to travel together. For our greatest pleasure. In Blenraden, they discover that Inara seems to have some weird abilities that helps her free herself of the control of some gods, and also even seems to manage to give commands to certain gods, which is pretty neat. Elo discovers that if he wants to have any chance to save his friend Arren, he will most likely have to sacrifice himself, which, goody two-shoes that he is happy to do. And of all the gods that he could summon to do the deeds, he has to pick up the fire goddess Seth. And he learns that, actually, Arren promised Hestra and Seth a sacrifice to turn him into a god. And his sacrifice is none other than Elo himself. What a good friend. With friends like these, am I right? Luckily for Elo, Kissen arrives to save the day. She kicks Seth's ass, drags her into the sea where she summons Osadisen, the ocean god, who crushes Seth and kills her, destroying all of her shrines in the process before he saves Kissen. Elo, Inara, and Skedi believe Kissen to be dead, so they decide to run away to the city of Leskia, where Kissen still has family in the persons of Tel and Yato, and they decide that they have to announce her death to her dear friends before they start preparing to fight Arren and his ambitions of becoming a god. All clear? Cool, then let's see what Book 2 has in store for us. Gods are forbidden in the kingdom of Midran. Now they are stirring, whispering of war. God-killer Kissen sacrificed herself to vanquish the fire god Seth and save her friends, but gods cannot be destroyed so easily, and neither can god-killers. Reeling from the loss of Kissen, young noble Inara and her little god of white lies, Skedi, seek answers to the true nature of their bond. The secret they uncover could determine the outcome of the war. Meanwhile, Elagast, no longer a loyal knight of King Arren, has been charged with destroying the man he once called friend. The king vowed to eradicate all gods, but has now entered into an unholy pact with the most dangerous of them all. The kingdom is on the brink of destruction. What will they each sacrifice to save it? As I've mentioned, I really loved this one. Maybe even a bit more so than Book 1, but not by much. Book 1 had a fair chunk of the story dedicated to like road trip vibe atmosphere part, and while it can be fun, it's not always my favorite thing. I still really liked it, but just because of that, Book 2, which has a little bit more of action, just felt more my vibe. Book 2, Sunbringer, also focuses Book 2 just has a lot more battles, and the plot focuses quite a lot on things that were planted in Book 1 and that I was really hyped about. So Inara's origin and Arren and Ella's relationship, which were both elements that I was super hyped to explore, so obviously I had fun. So I did prefer Book 2 overall. And while I was reading, at some point, I was just thinking, yeah, I prefer Book 2 in general, but there's no way the ending is going to be as crazy satisfying as the ending of Book 1. Because the bar was just crazy high. Like, that ending had me just completely jumping in my seat, just like completely wild. And I was thinking, yeah, okay, this ending is probably going to be nice, but there's no way I'm going to go that wild for it. No way. So I was kind of almost preparing myself for a disappointment, but no, it was great. It was amazing. Very satisfying. I did prefer the sheer insanity that was the end of Book 1, but this was still great. 10 out of 10. Very solid. Would read again. Anyway, let's start with the positives. So, of course, the main point that I absolutely adored in this book is the characters and their relationships. The characters are just honestly still great. The ones we already know from Book 1s obviously are amazing, 10 out of 10, love them to the moon and back, but we also get some new characters introduced in this book, quite a lot of them actually, and some of them had just no business being as cool as they were just like instant-like. For most of this book, the main characters are separated, so they kind of just all go on their own part of the story on their own. Sadly, I do prefer them all together, but it's quite fun to follow their own narratives each time. So yeah, you get to see what they're all up to separately, and it's fun. Obviously, there are always some characters that you get a bit more invested in than the others. Like, obviously for me, my favorite is Elo, so every time I have to go to someone else, I'm always a bit like, do I have to? I was having fun here. But even though I was always a bit sad at first, in the end, the other characters are just also amazing, so I was never not having fun. So after having to get used to it for a paragraph or two, I was just back into it. Kissen immediately wants to join Inara and Elo at the beginning of Book 1, but she just gets dragged away into her own adventure. She's basically dragged on her own quest, where she learns that her old nemesis Seth is not as dead as we were hoping she was. And she is preparing something nasty that Kissen will have to stop. I did love Kissen's journey. I thought it was really cool to see her becoming this kind of reluctant hero who just wants to get back to doing her own things, but is just like constantly taken back by it seems like expectations she doesn't really want upon herself. There are especially a few gods who try to like push her into this quest, and she's just like, guys, I'm a god killer. I don't help gods, I kill them. And I loved her reluctant growth across the book. It was very satisfying to watch. She pretty much stays true to herself, but she rises up to the occasion when she needs to. Inara's wasn't necessarily my favorite plot, but I did like the revelations that we get from her, and I still had fun reading her bits. I think the revelations where it comes to her made sense, and she remains a very intriguing character. I'm also quite baffled that they managed to make her basically a rebellious teenager, and she did not really get on my nerves that much. It's well done. I am really curious to see what will happen to her and Skedi. Elo is still awesome, still my favorite, but I will talk about him more in the second thing I liked about the book, which comes in like a minute or two. And quick shout out to the side characters, because honestly, they were great. They were just so fun. Like, there were a few of them where I just saw them for like one line is all it took for me to be like, yeah, okay, I like you. Can we have more of this guy? Can we have more of this chick? Please, just like, it just didn't take much to get them a very interesting, cool personality. And damn, the dialogues, the characters, sassy as hell, all of them. I mean, just who gave them the right to be this damn cool? Like, Naya, Yetta, Solemn, they were just cool. They were so awesome. Like, I'm just waiting for the spin-offs with them to come out. But yeah, let's now talk about the second thing that I really liked about the book, which, to no one's surprise, I assume, is Elo and Arren's dynamic. Yeah, sorry, it was just the absolute highlight of the book for me. What can I say? Friends to enemies. I'm just a simple girl. What do you want from me? I just love it as a trope and the absolute heartbreak that comes with it. And my god, this book just delivers big time. You don't see them interact much in the story, which a shame, of course, but they're constantly thinking about each other and about what the other one is doing and what they're gonna do and how do I stop him and blah blah blah. And obviously also just having to deal with like these conflicting emotions of, oh, I need to fight him, but also, damn, he used to be my friend and we used to get along so well together. Am I actually going to be able to take him down? And yes, I do say think about each other, because in this book we do get Arren's perspective, which we didn't in the first one, which is fair. Like, it would have absolutely given the last plot twist away, so no. But in this book we do get his perspective, and honestly at first I thought I would just like be so angry with him like constantly. And oh boy, I was very angry at him all the time. I was just like, oh my god, just do you hear yourself? Do you listen to yourself? Do you sometimes look at yourself in the mirror? But also sometimes I just somehow ended up feeling incredibly sorry for him. He feels very lonely and abandoned almost, and there's just sometimes this weird impression that he doesn't know exactly how bad he screwed up. The man tried to sacrifice his best friend to become a god, and he just kind of thinks Elo will just forgive him. Arren, my sweet, sweet boy, that's not how it works. So yeah, the man is delusional, and you can tell that he's in a lot of pain, especially when he starts realizing that Elo is not, in fact, going to forgive him that easily. And I was pretty much not on his side, but still somehow I ended up feeling sorry for him, which I did not expect. How did that happen? Team Ella all the way, though. I was just waiting for them to have a proper confrontation, and I'm not going to say here whether or not it happened, but I am hyped for book 3. Third point that I really wanted to mention is the representation. That is something that I completely forgot to mention in book 1, but it was already there and it was already really good, so that is just completely on me. I love the representation in this book, and it's not just because it is present that I like it. I also just like how it's portrayed. From Kissen having a prosthetic and being bisexual, Elo having 2 mothers, Tel being a mute using sign language, and Yato being in a wheelchair. In book 2 there's also a trans woman, and I don't know, I just love the fact that it's normal and mostly accepted in this universe. Like, there's no homophobia or transphobia, it's just a normal part of the universe, and yeah, to me, for some reason, this is just how I like it, because it's just gives this idea that it's a normal thing, and it's just refreshing. I don't know, it just feels oddly relaxing, if you know what I mean. It's like there's no reminder of how shitty things can be sometimes when it comes to that, and yeah, I just find it quite relaxing. It's just existing without it having to be a controversy, which I just like it. Also, an aspect that I liked is that the sign language is said to have like different dialects, which, true, it's like you don't have just one sign language in the real world either. I'm obviously not an expert, but there are different versions, so I thought that was a neat detail. And also it just helps flesh out the world a little bit more, and also give an interesting background to the character, because Inara, who's a noble, who's described as having like a very informal way of expressing herself when she's using sign language, which is quite intriguing for the character, because she basically learned sign language from her mother, and her mother is a noble, so where did she get this informal accent in her sign language? So yeah, pretty neat. I will also just quickly mention the style as a fourth point. I will not talk about it too long, but I just really like the style and how the prose was really pretty, but still straight to the point, pretty much like in book 1. That is a style that I really like, because it's just very much not action oriented, but it's kind of straight to the point. It's still said in a elegant way and everything, but it really has a subtlety that allows for the emotions to kind of speak for themselves. I just feel like the style is kind of restrained and focused on emotion, which is something that I really appreciate. But now let's talk about the negatives, and I couldn't think of any. I am totally biased in favor of this book, and I did consider trying to think of some negatives. I'm sure I could find some if I really put my mind into it, but I also decided that if it didn't strike me, I also don't want to force myself to think of negatives, if that makes sense. So anyway, I think that's pretty much it for the spoiler-free zone. Just go read the book if you haven't yet. It's really good, the characters are amazing, the story is brilliant, it's great, it's a great time. But we are now going to start spoiling, so if you want to go read the book and save yourself from the spoilers, just go now and leave a like before you go, subscribe if you want to see more of my face, and of course, once you're done reading the book, just come back and see if we agree. Anyway, we are now in the spoiler zone. You have been warned. And so we start the book directly with Arren's perspective. Sir? What do you have to say for yourself? So we see him and Hestra, the goddess who is more or less replacing his heart. They are in the capital of Sacre, and they are recovering from what happened in Blenraden. If you remember, Hestra had kind of created this twig and moss double of Arren, because that's apparently something she can do. She can make those twigs and moss double and send them far away without the person actually having to be there. So they both saw what happened in Blenraden, and that Seth is basically dead. And their plan has failed. So Hestra is furious, and she pretty much leaves Arren to die as she grieves. Yeah, okay, that's a way of starting a book. With the guy who I thought would be our main villain agonizing on the floor of his castle. Okay. His new knight commander, a woman called Peeta, arrives and witnesses the scene of Arren agonizing because his heart is now a god that is sulking. Arren is horrified at first because he is the king who has made all gods illegal, and yet here he is using a god to survive, which is a little bit hypocritical. Peeta asks him how long this has been going on, so he basically explains everything to her, everything that's happened in Blenraden, and the fact that he basically gave his life to save Midrin. And so instead of being horrified by the blatant double standards that he expects his people to live without gods while his own heart is basically fueled by a god, she thinks it's super cool that he's such a hypocrite. Couldn't be me. Okay, no, she just thinks it's admirable that he gave his life to the kingdom, I guess. But yeah, she's so impressed, in fact, that she pledges her allegiance to her then and there and calls him Sunbringer. Hestra gets intrigued. Sounds like her plan to get more followers for herself might still become a thing if she keeps following Arren, so she decides to stick around, and Arren is saved, it seems. Meanwhile, Elo, Inara, and Skedi arrive in Leskia, which is the city where Kissen's family still lives, so Yato and Tel. They deliver the news of Kissen's death to Yato and Tel, who don't take it very well. Elo just takes responsibility for what happened, which, yeah, technically he is the one who summoned Seth, so I guess, on the technicality. But yes, Yato and Tel are very upset, and it's sad, and they do kind of blame him for what happened. And it's sad because it's understandable. Obviously, it's not really Elo's fault. He was just trying his best, and it's just so clearly Seth's fault, but it's still a very understandable reaction. But anyway, in the meantime, not dead Kissen wakes up by Osidissen's side. He's actually dragged her across the ocean into Lycia, where his shrine is, and also the kingdom where she was born, and not actually too far from where her house used to be as a child. So, where her childhood home burned down, which... He tells her that he needs to talk to her and warn her of a great danger that's about to fall upon Midrin. Seth and her disciples are about to start an invasion on Midrin. Seth, sir, you killed Seth literally 5 seconds ago. Granted, it was in another book, but it was still like 5 seconds ago. Can you keep track, please? But no, of course she's not dead. her influence at the moment of her death was just so big, and her disciples love her so much that it's just not even going to take a year, a few months before she comes back reanimated by their love for her. So even if she died so hard that all her shrines have been destroyed at the same time, their love for her will bring her back, as they will rebuild her shrines and sacrifice animals and people to her. And like, it's gonna be super quick. And just as he tells her that, Osidisen gets attacked. Osidisen pulled out the harpoon and threw it back towards the boat, striking through its jib but doing no further damage. A second harpoon slammed into him, this one at the end of a rope that was quickly wedged tight. Kissen could see someone on the ship in white, snapping out orders as they dragged the god onto his back and towards the sea. This was not a random attack. This was planned. A god killing. The god of her childhood cried out as his body hit the stones of the cove, the sound like the creaking of the ship as the storm took it. Bredite was more deadly to gods than any metal was to human. The salted smell of his inner flesh burned Kissen's nose, the blood of old sacrifices mixed with ancient sea and smoke. What could she do? What should she do? This was her job. She hated gods. She hated Osidisen. She had for years. She should feel satisfied to see the bubbles of salt pouring up from his wounds as he was hauled like a sack of haddock into the waves, even if he had been her father's lover, the protector of her mother and brothers, the god who had just saved her. So what if he was dragged to his death, his dark grey eyes bored into hers, frightened, caught, vulnerable, like Skedi, like Inara. He had remembered her, after all these years. He had honored his promise. This was more than most humans she had met. Shit, muttered Kissen. She brought the blade's edge down on the rope, which snapped and hissed back into the water. Not joking! This scene had me on the edge of my seat. I took 3 separate sets of notes on my Kindle that were basically just like, oh my god, Kissen, save him, save him, save him, save him! And luckily she does, and then they get separated. Before she leaves his cave, though, she makes herself a freaking new prosthetic out of his shrine. Because, well, she busted her old prosthetic while fighting Seth. A leg out of a god's shrine, Kissen. Damn, this woman is something. She ends up ashore where she finds a new shrine dedicated to Seth. So badass as she is, she just decides to destroy it. And she very naturally decides to start a quest to destroy all of the shrines dedicated to Seth that she can find along the way. Meanwhile, on Elo and Inara's side, we get a few absolutely heartbreaking scenes where they try to mourn Kissen while also trying to appease Yato and Tel, but they are just absolutely furious at Elo. Again, not wanted, but understandable. Which is weird for me, because I'm totally biased towards my favorite character, and Elo is my boy and an absolute sweetheart. Do not come after him. So I just think that it means a lot about the writing and how good it is that I am not currently demanding Tel and Yato's head on a silver platter. But Elo and Inara basically just explain the whole content of book 1 to Tel and Yato to try and explain what happened to their basically sister. And they also explain that Canavan basically cursed Elo and that's what drew the shadows to them and blah blah blah. So they explain the whole content of book 1 to Tel and Yato to try and explain to them what happened to their basically sister, including what happened with Canavan cursing Elo, and that's something that Tel and Yato just straight up refused to believe because Yato was the one who recommended Canavan to take Inara and Kissen to Blenraden. But Inara manages to convince them to go to Canavan to get his side of the story, so they go. And along the way, it gets kind of confirmed that Canavan is part of some sort of rebellion against King Arren, so Elo just decides that he wants to try and see if he can squat this little rebellion. So he can potentially stop his former friend Arren from becoming a tyrant. Yes. Give me all of the drama. Give me all of the precious friends to bitter enemies drama. I need it. I live for it. Gimme. Inara wants to help him in this attempt. She's very powerful, so she knows she could be very useful. And also she just kind of wants to sink her hands on the man who burned her house to the ground and killed her mum. But ultimately, Elo refuses to take her with him because he just cannot see himself dragging a 12-year-old to war. She takes it pretty poorly. She feels like he's abandoning her, like he thinks she's just not good enough for this. And after having lost her mother, her home, seemingly Kissen, she just feels like he's abandoning her now. And all that after she took care of his wounds when they came back from Blenraden, so really she feels like she just kind of was used by him for as long as he needed her, and now that he doesn't need her, like he's just casting her aside. When really he just doesn't think it's fair to ask this of a child, which... Correct, Inara, Elo began, his tone apologetic. No, hissed Inara, her stomach plunging. Elo, no, you promised. I said I'd be your protector, said Elo, not your commander. He pulled his hand from hers, slowly, deliberately. I will not lead a child to war. War came to me, and, well, I completely understand Inara's feeling, but he's right. Obviously, he's right. So they split up, and Elo stays with Canavan while Inara goes back with Yato and Tel. Also, we kind of learned that Tel, who is an archivist, was kind of helping Canavan with parts of the rebellion, where she would like sneak out certain archives for them to like smuggle out and copy and safeguard, just in case the king suddenly decides that he wants to destroy all registers referring gods. So yeah, Tel is a bit of like a pacifist rebel, if you will. Oh, and we also learned that Canavan has like this kind of weird connection to God himself, something a bit like kind of Inara and Skedi, and this is how he managed to curse Elo in book 1. A curse that's been removed from Elo by Inara, by the way. I am not sure if I just completely missed it in book 1 or if it happened in between books, but poof, it's gone. Anyway, Elo ends up meeting people from this little rebellion thing that's going on, but turns out it's not exactly what he expected. They're not trying to fight back against Arren, they're just kind of printing pamphlets. We're introduced to Naya, a pretty damn cool chick who's basically the most pacifist person in the world. And also some guy called Arren, who's a little bit antagonistic towards Elo. But then again, they kinda all are, because he wants to fight and they don't want to fight. He's basically trying to get them to fight alongside him against Arren, and they're just like, dude, we're pacifists. And I have to say, I got it. Like, for once, I wasn't completely on Team Elo here. Like, I get that Arren broke your heart and that you think he's dangerous and must be stopped, but maybe don't force them to fight if they don't want to. Especially since Arren has technically not done anything that outrageous to them. Like, yes, okay, he made their gods illegal and they really like their gods, but if they don't feel like taking the swords against him, I don't think it's right to like ask that of them. Because at the end of the day, yes, gods are illegal, it's not a cool thing, but they're not oppressed, so it's not like you have to shake them into action. So it read almost like he was kind of forcing people into his personal conflict with Arren. I don't think it was supposed to be read this way. I think it's also like there's this whole aspect that Arren is trying to become a god and kind of on the verge of becoming a tyrant. So I also understand the emergency from that perspective. But yeah, still, I was a little bit torn. But yeah, I mean, I really do think that it was supposed to be more of like, we need to stand up for ourselves before this man just like kind of takes us over completely. And there were some really nice lines and thoughts around such a debate that was really cool. If we commit to violence, when will it stop? If we do not, countered Elo, will anything change? Damn, that's a good line. Meanwhile, Arren's influence keeps growing in Sac, which is Midran's capital and where Arren lives, basically. His new nickname of Sunbringer is really catching on, and he's securing new allies, it seems. He's having a council with some trusted advisors, during which he decides to calm down the rebellion that's ever growing against him, to have some of his troops, most of his troops, parades around Leskia. I don't remember the whole logic of it, but trust me, bro. So he will basically have his troops parade around Leskia, a city that is part of his kingdom, so it's not technically a personal attack against Lord Yetta, but it totally is. Lord Yetta, the leader lord of Leskia, by the way. I should have said that before. So it's a passive-aggressive move on his part, if you will. On Inara's side, she feels sad and abandoned, and there's a pretty cool scene where she asks Skedi to comfort her, which, honestly, heartbreaking. Throughout the whole beginning of the book, she just keeps snapping at Skedi because he's trying to comfort her and reassure her by telling her white lies like, everything's gonna be okay, you'll be fine. And every time she just replies in a very snappy tone, like, don't lie to me. But here she just completely crumbles, and it's so sad. Tell me it will be alright, Skedi, she said, breathing through her sobs. Please, we're here now. Please lie to me. Skedi flattened his ears. You said you didn't want that, he said. You made me promise. Please. She pulled up her knees into a ball, her colors crashing and spinning out of control. How could she hold this much in her? She had enough sorrow to tear the world apart. Please. Oh, God. Like, after all of her snapping at him throughout the beginning of the book, telling him, no, don't lie to me, I'm an adult, I need you to be honest with me. Don't sugarcoat it, I can take it, like, don't lie to me. The fact that she comes to him and be like, okay, lie to me now, is just such a good way of showing just how much at the end of her rope she is. Yeah, I love it. It's like her principles are just like, she's just giving up on them. She feels that bad, and it's perfect. After she has a little bit of a meltdown with that, she ends up finding a purpose again by joining the rebellion in whatever way she can, by asking Tell if she can help her with smuggling the archives out of the archives. She just needs to be a part of the rebellion, no matter how small the task feels. She just needs to feel that she is part of the movement that is trying to take Arren down. And truth be told, she's also kind of curious if she can find anything around gods, to see if she can learn something about Skedi Saturn herself. So Tell takes her to the archives. Inara and Skedi do manage to sneak into a restricted area where they're not supposed to be, but it has information about gods. They don't find as much as they were hoping, but they do find something on Skedi, which makes him bizarrely relieved. He fluffed up his fur as she pointed at the page. Skedi said. Skedi crept closer. He could hardly believe it. There he was, on ink and paper. Only one reference, but still. I'm here, he murmured. He looked up at her. I'm real. Of course you're real, Skedi. But because he doesn't remember much about who he was and what he was doing before, it just feels like such a massive relief to him to realize that, yeah, there are traces of him and he, like, is officially a god who exists. And something else that they learn is that apparently he was very close friends with Yusuf, the god of safe haven. Meanwhile, Kissen is still trying to destroy Seth's shrines, but she's slowly starting to come to the realization that her quest is just absolutely pointless. Seth is just way too popular. Her shrines are just popping left and right, and people are just rebuilding them much faster than Kissen can take them down. At some point, she gets caught in a blizzard and is rescued by the god of mountain wind, The, who dumps her in a safe area where she meets a hermit called Doric, who worships Arren, the river goddess that we saw in book 1. Oh well, fancy seeing you here, Arren. Arren basically tells Kissen the same thing that Osiddisen already told her, that Seth is back and she is going to lead an army from Talicia to declare war against Midrin. Except Arren tells it in, like, harsher words. And she basically wants Kissen to stop them because Seth's plan is to become the ultimate goddess, which Arren doesn't really exactly approve of. So basically, this little infighting that's going on in Midrin, yeah, that needs to stop. You know that rebellion thing against the king? They need to reconcile the king and the rebellion. They need to kiss and make out. Oh, did I say make out? I'm sorry. I meant makeup. Kiss and make up. My bad. And go fight against Seth in Talicia. Are you telling me that I don't just get friends to enemies, but potentially friends to enemies to lovers? Friends. Friends to enemies to friends. The possibilities. My god, the possibilities. Elo and Arren having to work together after all the pain and betrayal. Yes, I'll eat it all and then have a second serving. Are you kidding me? Is it my birthday? Oh, back to Kissen though. This is so cool. Oh my god. Kissen, yes. She's this god killer who claims to hate gods. Yet they just keep coming to her for requests. They save her, and now it just seems like she's kind of the girl to save the world, and she just doesn't really see it. She's just like, nah, I'm a god killer. I don't help God. I kill them. Also, have you seen me? I ain't your girl to save the world. People like me don't change the world, said Kissen. We just survive it. But the gods just don't seem to see it that way, and they just keep pushing for her to do the thing. And I don't know, I just think it's cool to see her having to overcome those inner barriers that she has. Because you can tell that she's more than she thinks, and you can tell as well that she doesn't hate gods as much as she claims to, or even think she does. There's a lot of love for Osiddisen, clearly. Like, she did end up saving his life, and I do love in this scene where she saves him the fact that she just calls him the god who watched her first steps and watched her grow up. And there's also kind of a sense of affection that she has towards Arren, and yet she just keeps claiming that she hates all gods, even though it's not really true. So yeah, I love this. I can't wait to see what happens when it comes to that. Anyway, let's get back to Elo and see what he's up to. His meeting with the rebels having been less fruitful than he was hoping for, he decides that he's just going to go to the Lord of Leskia, who is Lord Yeta. Much to his surprise, Naya is there and she tells him that she changed her mind and that she will fight actually. He's surprised and asks her why. And she reveals that she just loves gods and she just wants to fight for them because she owes them a lot, mostly because she was born in the body of a man and she was a woman, and so some of the gods helped her fix that, so she feels like she owes them a lot. And I think this is the moment where I just realized that I hadn't really picked up on how spoiled I was in book 1 with the representation in this book, because I just thought that scene was really good. I like how it's portrayed as the most normal thing in the world here, and it's just not questioned, it's just as easy as that. It also just doesn't feel like, patting ourselves on the back for inclusion. It's just inclusion because it exists, so there's no reason not to show it, and yeah, I love it. So Naya decides to join Elo in his attempt to convince Lord Yeta to tell Arren to fuck right off. The leader of the guards, a man called Farosh, takes them to him. Which doesn't seem to be that hard of a challenge, considering Lord Yeta and Elo already know each other, and Yeta seems to already like Elo quite a lot. Also, Lord Yeta sounds like a very cool dude. He came and clapped Elo on the arm, a little too hard. No bowing, no bowing. I'm not wearing shoes for looking at. Oh, that's cute. I like him. Lord Yeta is already aware that Arren has decided to come parade in his city, and he's not too thrilled about it. So it's true, said Yeta. You have turned against your king. He is not my king. Not anymore. Farosh shifted his feet, moving onto his front foot. More relaxed? Ooh, how intriguing. To tell me the king is marching on my city, Yeta went on. This I already know. The sword has told me to drain the depths of fish and water to feed them all. Elo closed his mouth. And I suppose you are come to apologize for your brother-in-arms, thick as thieves as you were, and tell me he means no harm to me and mine. Yeta steepled his finger and looked over from Elo to Naya, then back. Tell me to open my arms and halls to him and his many-mouthed army he doesn't know how to feed. So it seems like Yeta is not too impressed with Arren's new tendencies. Especially because he does seem to be quite fond of gods himself, so all in all, it's not too difficult to convince him to close his doors to Arren. However, his son Bellerys arrives, super angry. Sounds like he is a very strong supporter of Arren, and he hates Elo, and he's just fuming at the idea that his father is hosting a traitor. You're no lord of these lands yet, Bellerys, he said. This is my house, my city, my lands, and I can take them from you as quickly as I gave you life in the womb. Okay, so how long until Bellerys kills his dad? Place your bets in the comments. Back to Inara. She has to attend a meeting of some archivists, and that's where we meet a new cool character. Some guy called Solemn, whom I immediately decided that I really liked. The great shrine to the god of Safe Haven has now been fully restored in Restish, said Solemn. 12 white cows, 6 black horses, and an anointed goat were sacrificed at its base. The archivist erupted into gossip. Even those shining with the king's colors swarmed. Yusuf. Inara tried not to reach for Skedi. But even if Yusuf came back, he would know nothing of Skedi, of the Krayas, of his past, of her. What could he really tell her? Do I store this under Architecture? Solemn asked brightly. Or below with the other signs of his return? Cheeky. Unfortunately, the meeting doesn't go super well, especially when Tel starts suggesting openly that they should probably try and protect the archives relating to gods because knowledge is important. The people who are loyal to the king are just horrified by her suggestion, but she almost manages to convince them. That is, until someone points out that Inara has been sneaking into a restricted section of the archive that is dedicated to God. So, because she was with Tell, this has to be a sign of treason. So a riot just erupts in the yard of the archives, and now Tell and Inara have to run away or be arrested. Luckily, Solam comes to the rescue alongside another guy named Cal, and they both help them escape. Back to Elo again. His little rebellion against Arren is actually starting to take shape, with Lord Yetta agreeing to fight alongside him, and Naya's guy is also agreeing to join the fight. But they don't have much respect for Elo at this point, and they don't really think much of him. Nothing a good sparring session can't fix, though. And we get a really cool scene of Elo sparring with this guy called Arren. So Elo starts by letting Arren pick his weapon of choice, and I love this scene. They start fighting, and Arren gets really smug really fast when he starts putting up a decent fight. And he just basically thinks he's gonna wipe the floor with Elo. But throughout this whole fight, Elo just kind of observes his way of fighting. So there's this sense that he could just win the fight then and there, but he's just kind of using it as a way to make sense of who Arren is as a fighter in regards to the battle coming up and what he's going to be able to do with him on the battlefield. The guy is such a badass that he's already 3 steps behind, like trying to understand how best to use this guy in the fight against Arren when Arren is just 100% into the fight. The Inca wielded the staff like a sword and went straight for Elo's side. Elo stepped back and met the staff with a crack of his own, the sound loud enough to set a wave of doves flying off the rafters. The man was strong, even stronger than Elo had expected, and it stung his hands and wrists to meet the blow. His chest, too, wrenched with the effort, agony shivering across his seared flesh and muscle. Hard work had made Arren's upper body powerful, and he knew how to use it, stepping forward in a loose stance and coming sideways at Elo. Elo moved back, bearing the brunt of Arren's assault, shifting the blows with his staff and defending as they crossed the stalls. The reverberation hurt his chest. More than just the surface, it went deep into his muscles, troubled his bones, his lungs. Each turn drove an ache into his sternum and across his back. Arren pressed his presumed advantage, driving Elo another step back, then making a heavy stab for his chest as Peritha let out a cheer. He was decent, definitely fast. If he was younger, he would be a good squire. But obviously, Elo wins the fight, the respect of the rebels, and he follows up by giving Arren some nice advice on how to improve his stance, and Arren slowly comes to the realization that Elo could have ended the fight whenever he damn pleased. "I'm not even sure I know what happened there," he said, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "You could have felled me outright, couldn't you?" Elo didn't say yes. "You're very strong," he said instead, "but your guard is weak from your belly down, and your stance is too short." He stepped back. "Look, strike my leg from the inside." Elo is such a cool dude, honestly. But then after that, he is thrown a little bit of a curveball. "The look in your eyes when you talk about the king," he said. "You fought together, worked together. If you stood blade to blade, think you could beat him?" "I can beat him," Elo said certainly. "Could you kill him?" said Carnavan. Elo tightened his grip on the staff and heard a light intake of breath from Farosh. It had to happen. Him and Arren. He knew it as surely as there was a god's hand scarred on his chest. Arren had gone too far. But Yetta did not want the king's head. He wanted to bring him to heel. Elo would have to tread carefully to achieve an end to Arren's borrowed life. If it came to it, Canavan added, clearly catching Farosh's unease. Elo gritted his teeth. Could he do it? Kill the man he had cared for most in the world? A rattle at the door saved him an answer. Oh, I love this so much. Yes! This is what I'm here for. Thank you. The conflicting emotions. The pain. But after that, Ella learns from Yato about the riot that happened at the archives. And he also learns that Inara was there as well, so he decides to go and see if he can help. During her hiding, Inara learns a little bit more about the gods in Leskia, because apparently there are still quite a lot of gods in Leskia that are just kind of being worshipped discreetly, which is, I guess, a good thing to know ahead of the battle against Talicia. Are we going to get a epic battle between gods similarly to something that happened in Blundraden years ago and that we haven't been lucky enough to witness? Or unlucky, I guess. But I sure am hyped. One of the gods that we learn about is Skian, who seems to me the main goddess of Leskia, and she's this goddess of knowledge who used to be human and died a martyr and then became a goddess. So humans can turn into God. So now I'm wondering if we're setting up something for book 3. Also, now that he's in the company of some god-loving archivists, and because his power to push white lies upon people is a pretty sweet deal, Skedi is starting to get some nice offering from Solemn and Cal. Which I think makes Inara a little bit jealous, because she did make an offering to Skedi herself at some point earlier in the book, which was another really cool scene, by the way. But yeah, she was giving him an offering and he wanted to refuse because she's his friend, so she shouldn't have to be making any offering to him, but she insisted because it makes him stronger when she gives him something, but also she was a bit bitter about something, and I mean, all in all, the scene was really cool. And I don't know why, but I do love jealous friends in stories, especially when it's handled well. When we don't pretend like it's normal, but we just recognize it and treat it for what it is, like something like a natural, undesirable feeling that we sometimes can have, and we need to learn to manage it and get a handle on it to save the friendship. And I guess it's just like not as common as romantic jealousy, but I find that it can be just as complex and compelling, and I'm just, every time I see it's done well, I'm just eating it up. But yeah, what I'm saying, I guess, is that this book is just feeding me all the tropes that I love, and I'm eating it all until there's nothing left. Anyway, in the meantime, Kissen, while talking to Arren, is being served slice after slice of humble pie. You are a petty mortal who thinks killing ancient things for the price of coin is a right you have earned. A few paltry years of small pains and sad little feuds, and you think you can put out a fire by spitting at it. She also talks to Doric quite a lot, and they end up exchanging their views on gods. And this seems to be a very important moment for Kissen, with a lot of realizations. We really do get a sense that anger has been clouding her judgment for so long, and now she just needs to open her eyes. It sounds with a dumb little line that I just really love for some reason. Not a bad thing, said Doric into her silence. This, every morning, he nodded at the bright water, the ragged mountains. Even when it hails, Doric cast her a side eye. When it hails, he said, I sit further back. Talking about his cave, of course. I just find it lovely because it's a good illustration of her situation. Like, he just gives a very simple solution to this problem, and it just kind of feels like it reflects her own dilemmas. Like, she just cannot see the obvious. And it's just a little hint that sometimes your situation is not ideal, but there might be an easy solution that you haven't considered. And I love it because it's so simple but so efficient. And it's a good icebreaker for the conversation that they have after. I've never met a person who believes in nothing at all. I believe in myself. He laughed in a puff of smoke, then choked on it and spluttered, coughing until Kissen gave him a pat on the back and he took a swig at his tea. The self can only see what the eyes give, said Doric. You don't know how many cubs are being born in the valleys, or which side of the mountain will be next to full. I can guess, said Kissen. With the experience of a paltry 30 or so years, said Doric. How many years has Answater known? How many centuries of memory does she hold? If you do not know yourself what will happen next, who do you trust to guess better than a god? Kissen hates gods because her family was brutally and cruelly taken from her in the name of a god because of said god's conflict with another god. So in her mind it's fair to conclude that gods create problems in a mortal's life. But I find that this scene just does a really good job at explaining the appeal of gods and why some people really do want them in their lives, because some of them just hold wisdom that mortals will never be able to access otherwise. And there seems to be a lot of serenity coming with accepting that part of them. So it's just a beautiful conversation that really helps put things into perspective for Kissen. And after that, she decides that, fuck it, she's gonna help. She's gonna do it. She will try and help Anne by stopping the conflict between the rebellion in Leskia and King Arren, and she will try to make them join forces against Seth and Talicia. I'm so hyped for this! So, Fair, the god of mountain wind, decides to take her where she needs to go, which, you know, Leskia. But after some teleportation-ish things, she arrives not in Leskia, but in Sacre, the capital. She asks Fair, what the fuck, and he just says, this is where you need to be. Okay. I thought she was supposed to stop the rebellion in Leskia, but okay, I guess. Meanwhile, in Leskia, where Kissen should have been but isn't, Elo found Inara and Skedi, and now he is preparing himself to fight against Arren. There's a cute scene where Naya gifts him an armor that used to belong in her family, and I don't know, the scene is almost kind of flirty, I guess, I don't know. If you look at me too closely, you'll go blind, said Naya, and Elo blushed. I'm sorry, he said, and she smiled. I'm confused. I thought he was going to be with Kissen. Well, I guess he still thinks she's dead, so... But still, am I reading this right? I'm not opposed to it, I'm just asking. Anyway, after that, the battle with some of the knights starts. Like, I think Arren is not yet here, but there are some guards stationed in the city, so battles are starting. And I'm a bit conflicted because, technically, I know they shouldn't be fighting because Talicia and everything, but I just want Elo to wipe the floor with everyone and get the revenge he deserves. They handle the battle pretty okay, but not all's well that ends well, because effing Canavan, it seems, has used some god magic to make his friends go berserk, and Ariam dies in the process. Shame. I liked Ariam. Naya is horrified, both at having to watch her friend died, but also by the fact that she was just like killing people left and right because of Canavan's spell. And she just wasn't able to stop herself despite being a pacifist at heart. Then when does it stop? She said at last. I don't know, said Elo honestly, cruelly. I just know we cannot let a king drag us into darkness without fighting back. No matter how much we lose. It does matter, said Elo. It matters what we lose, but that doesn't stop it. Man, these dialogues! Naya starts resenting Elo a little bit for involving them in the conflict, but Elo has none of it. He's like, you agreed though, so that's not on me. And because he's kinda right, they just leave it there. And after that, Arren arrives in Leskia and sends a messenger to negotiate. Elo captures said messenger, and as a response to Arren's message, he ties up the guy naked and lets him in front of the city's gates, which is a little bit funny, I guess. Arren held back a growl in his throat. Elo gasped, he muttered. His friend always did have a wry sense of humor hidden beneath his sanctimonious exterior. Even for him, this was low. He wanted to make a mockery of him, for nothing could disarm a leader's power faster than laughter. Did he have no respect for everything Arren had done? Sir, everything you've done? You mean the betrayal and everything? The sheer audacity of this man, I swear. Arren ends up getting the man killed, which is a bit awkward. But I guess the guy was a dick, so nothing too bad. After that, the army doesn't really move. So Elo is a bit like, what's going on here? And that's when he gets a terrible feeling and he goes to see Lord Yetta and finds him dead in his house, killed by his son Beloris. Right, let's get back to our bet. All those who guessed 75% into the book, you were correct. Give yourself a good old pat on the back. Those who guessed at some point in book 3, it was a valiant effort. And those who guessed, no, Lord Yetta will survive. I believe. You are perfect the way you are. Don't ever let the world change you. But yeah, Beloris now plans on accusing Elo of killing his father. Of course. So the situation is less than ideal. Luckily, Elo manages to run away. He finds Inara and Skedi again. They realize that they're in a very tough spot. But Inara decides to help the connection that she's established across the book with the gods of Leskia to ask them for help in the conflict. Which sounds awesome in so many ways. So she reaches out and cuts her hair as a sacrifice to them to beg them to join the battle alongside them. But before we start being sucked into the battle, let's have a quick jump to Sacre, where we'll just check in very quickly on Kissen and what she's up to. She is found by guards and she tells them that she has a message for the king. And the guards are just like, fuck the king. And they take her to see someone else who seems to be planning a rebellion of their own. She is introduced to this person and behold, it's Lessa Creyer, aka Inara's mom, alive. Now that's gonna be interesting. Kissen tries to convince them to focus their battling effort on Talicia instead, but they don't listen to her and they attack Sacre instead. They manage to get into the building where the king lives and they find a young man sleeping in the hearth. Back to Inara and Elo. The battle starts. Inara calls upon the god of roses to build thorn bushes to block the knight's path, and she calls upon the canal god to flood the streets. Skedi is roaming through the sky, pushing white lies into the gods, making them doubt themselves and trying to incite people to rebel against them and make sure that the knights know that they are not welcomed in Leskia. It's just starting off so well, blocking Arren's troops and efforts to march into Leskia, but at some point the knights just start taking Bredite blades, which is a metal that can kill gods. And unfortunately, that very quickly takes care of the god that Inara called upon, and most of them end up dying. Machiron was gone. Canavan gone. The roses were burning. Elo awaited the king. She had summoned them all to die. Oh yeah, Canavan dies. Tragic. But more importantly, Inara's guilt is crushing her. She has called all of these gods to fight for her, and now some of them are gone. So, yeah, damn sad. But even more importantly, Arren's troop are now walking towards the archive where Elo stands, ready for the fight we've been building up to since the end of book 1. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. The battle between Elo and Arren, and It did not disappoint. Elo is wearing a full armor with a helm that hides his face and has some big ass antlers that mirror the former god of war Murtagh that he defeated in the Blenrodden War. And now they're facing each other, Elo alone and Arren with his army. And the tension rises. How is it going to play out? Are they going to fight? Who's gonna win? Are they actually going to kill each other? Elo kind of tries to reason with him and just get him to withdraw from the city. These people are innocent, he said, stepping forward. Let them go. There are no innocent who stand against their king, said Peeta, her hands tightening on her reins. Her voice carried over the plaza, quelling the sounds of the people. There are no innocents who ally with the gods against the crown. They are protecting their city, Elo shouted back, his voice ricocheting around the square. From a tyrant who sets it ablaze. They were 20 paces from him. He had no bow, and he was not as good at a shot as he was a swordsman. Arren tilted his antlers. God, he had modelled himself on Murtagh, the god of war who had almost killed him. It sickened Elo to his stomach. And what has your king done to deserve your mobs and violence? He said through his helm. His voice crackled, strange and distant. Flames burst through the gap in his chest. I came here in hope, in glory, in reason. It is not I who called the gods upon your streets, filled it with demons. A few people had stopped their work. The singers had fallen silent, listening. I have done nothing but give my heart for you, he said, and put his hand to his chest, to the flaming, artful tear. Elo felt a dull pain in his belly that spread and prickled over the scars on his chest. I gave my family, my blood, my life. Elo felt Arren's eyes on him as the king stretched out his hand and lowered his voice, as if speaking directly to him. Was my death not enough, said Sunbringer, for your love? Arren needs all the cold showers. The tension increases. The king's knights start chanting Sunbringer's name while some of the pacifist archivists start chanting in support of Elo. And they chant Elo's new nickname, Lion of Leskia. Elo readies himself for a fight. All he needs is an opening, but in this instance he can't help but be clouded by a little bit of doubt. It's still his old friend that he's going to fight, and he can't help but wonder. How does Arren feel? Does he still care, or is he just full of hatred towards Elo? Worse, does he feel nothing at all? Elo's fury burned with a passion as hot as his dedication had once been. But what if Elo was nothing to him? Just a man he had tried to sacrifice? Why did Elo fear his indifference more than his hatred? Oh my god, Elo, I know! But I assure you, Arren is not indifferent. If anything, he is a little obsessed. Meanwhile, the knights have stormed into the archives and managed to retrieve the goddess of knowledge, Skian. They bring her outside where Arren and Elo are just about to have their confrontation. Arren walks towards Elo while Elo is still trying to find an opening to attack the man who was once his friend. Arren had come towards him, opening his arms. Come back to me, Elo, he had said, his voice every bit the same as Elo remembered, soft-spoken, a twist of humour, as if they shared a secret. Not the bellowing god-ruler on a white horse. End this madness. Come back to my side, where you belong. Elo had tentatively, subtly, pushed Naya behind him. You are the last thing Arren loves, and he has chosen to lose you. Unforgivable. Arren had dragged out a peaceful god before her faithful, killed a father with his son's hand, burned history, families, houses to the ground. He had broken their friendship, their love, over power. No, he would not forgive Sunbringer or Arren. Neither deserved his love. Inara is hidden somewhere. She takes her bow and shoots an arrow in an attempt to save Skian. And while it sadly doesn't save the goddess, it gives Elo the opening that he was waiting for. He attacks Arren, and finally the fight begins. And it's amazing. They fight evenly matched. Elo needs to stay close to Arren because there are some archers who are ready to just shoot him straight with arrows the second he gets too far away. So basically he's only spared from the arrows due to his being too close to Arren. They cannot take the risk of hurting the king. But this also means that even if Elo wins the fight, he is just gonna be shot on the spot. And he is well aware. He is basically screwed regardless, so the only thing he can do is try to take Arren with him. Which is, if you remember, the exact opposite to the end of book 1, where he was basically screwed no matter what he did, and the only thing he could do was try to save Arren. This book. As they fight, Arren just keeps trying to convince Elo to come back to him. Now he doesn't need a sacrifice to become a god, so they can just be together again. I could honestly just read the whole scene out loud. I was just so invested and everything was just so good. They just start arguing as they fight about the betrayal and about how Elo basically abandoned Arren as a newly traumatized king on a threatened throne with no one around him to love him. At first Arren is chill and he's just trying to reach out to his friend and convince him to come back to him, but the more they argue, the angrier he gets. "Loved me," the king cried over the screech of their blades. This was more like Arren. Rash, cross, passionate. "You loved me at a distance," Elo gasped. "More and more you stepped away as the world changed from under me." Elo was leading him to the center of the plaza, to the open ground, 2 pieces on an empty board. "More and more," Arren continued, his voice cracking with rage. "You refused to love me enough to stay. You never loved me like I loved you." All the cold showers, I tell you. Elo also mentions at some point that while he is out of breath, he just doesn't seem to be hearing Arren's breathing. The blade ran true, out through the king's back, shattering his armor. Arren cried out in pain as the metal went through him. The plaza fell silent, other than the distant cries of the firefighters, still beating back the flames. Elo stood still, his sword in his hand and through his friend's back, his king's back. He was horrified, terrified by what he had done. He knew, this time, that if the arrows didn't finish him, his heartbreak would. "I'm sorry," said Elo. His voice broke, his throat tightened with emotion. "I'm so sorry that it came to this." Arren lifted his head, his antlers rising. "I didn't think," he said in a whisper. "I honestly didn't think you would do it." He seemed astounded. "You truly want me dead?" Elo held his sword firm, though his hands trembled. "You died 3 years ago," he said. "The man I knew. You're not him." He closed his eyes. The silence was deafening. No one breathed. "Now we die, together, 3 years too late." The darkness within the helm looked at him, and then Sunbringer laughed. A hollow, dry, chuckling sound, like the echo of wind through a furnace. "No," said Arren. He lifted his hand and put it on Elo's. Something was wrong. His movement was not of that of a dying man. Now Elo was close enough to kiss him. "Okay, lover boy?" Now Elo was close enough to kiss him. He could hear no breath from Arren's lungs. He could, however, smell wood smoke, the smoke of a hearth. Not today. Arren lifted his other hand to the grill that covered his face and swung it open. He was not flesh. Twigs and branches, sparking with flame. His eyes were embers, his mouth a maw of fire. An effigy of burning tinder, Hestra's creation. Not Arren, his double. "Today, I'll save you," it said in Arren's voice. "Today, it's my turn." So, it was not really Arren that Elo was fighting, but his twigs and moss double created by Hestra. Branches start growing out of the helm and wrap around Elo, and just as Inara and Skedi arrive, it just completely wraps them, and the 4 of them disappear. To reappear in Sac in front of a baffled Lady Kreia and Kissen. "Mother," said Inara, her breath catching in her throat. Behind her, rather worse for wear, was another dead woman, Kissen. The reunion is, of course, freaking beautiful. You can see the joy they all feel leaking through the page. I would read it, but I feel like I still need to leave some stuff out. And also, if I were to read everything I've loved, this review would just be me reading the goddamn book. Inara reveals her powers and her true connection to Yusuf, the god of safe haven. She tries to kill Arren by incapacitating Hestra, who is basically his heart, but Kissen stops her. And she reveals to everyone Seth's plan to invade Midran using Talisia's army. They don't really want to listen to her at first, and they just want to kill Arren there and then. But then Kissen tells Inara to use the gift that Anne gave her in book 1 that helps her connect to Anne. So she does, and Anne shows everyone the great disaster that's about to happen. Everyone looks absolutely terrified, and that's how the book ends. And I cannot describe just how hyped I am to read book 3, where all of these people will have to work together to defeat Seth. Inara and Lessa having to work together after believing each other dead for so long, and having to work with the king who tried to have them killed. Elo and Arren having to work together after all that happened between them. Kissen having to work with gods to save Midran despite hating them, or claiming she does. Having to rise up to becoming a hero despite believing that she's barely managing to survive. There are no words to describe how much I need to read this damn book. But now let's talk about the characters. Let's start with Kissen. I love Kissen. She's great. As I've said, I love her journey throughout this book of having to become more than one she ever meant to become. Being confronted with her lack of hatred towards a citizen, after having believed for so long that she felt nothing but hatred towards the ocean god. Being thrown into a conflict that just feels way too big for herself just because some gods think she's up for the task. One thing that I genuinely love about Kissen is how caring she is underneath her rude exterior. There are just so many times in this book where she is pressed to keep moving and keep going, despite being so tired and beaten, and usually it's the thought of someone else that keeps her going. Either for Inara or Elo, or even at some point for a damn horse that she rescued on her journey throughout Talisia. And I just really love the scene as well where Anne calls her out on the fact that she thinks that because she's had trauma in her childhood, she's just owed to hate gods and kill them because of all the pain and suffering she's been through, when really she just isn't. Because most gods aren't Seth. And Kissen has just kind of extended her hatred towards Seth, who really is the only one who wronged her, to all other gods who have basically not wronged her. And because gods are illegal in Midran anyway, and there was a war against them and all, I didn't find Kissen's hatred towards God that jarring back in book 1. But when Anne called her out on it, I was just like, oh yeah, Kissen does need to chill now that you mention it. I feel like our characters are often not exactly right in this book. And you always do understand why they do certain things or react in certain ways. But they always do get called out on their bad behavior, which is something that I really appreciate. There's nothing that pisses me off more than a main character who does something bad or annoying and they never get called out on it because they're the main characters, so somehow they get away with it. Somehow they're just allowed to be pricks. No, they're not. Have them be annoying twats, of course, but have someone call them out on it. And in this book, to me, it was just perfect. Sure, most of the main characters at some point or another just kind of mildly annoyed me at one point or another. And then again, it was always kind of mild because even if their behavior was just not the best, I always knew where they were coming from, even when I wasn't fully on board with something. And the fact that they were called out on it later, even better. Anyways, back to Kissen. I can't wait to see how her story continues in book 3. Is she going to mend her broken relationship with gods in general and Osiris specifically? I sure hope so. Now let's talk about Elo. God, I love Elo. He's like a sassy goody two-shoe, which is a great combo. Is that what you want, Arren? Elo said lightly. A fight. Seems a poor way to prove a leader. I've known good leaders who could not beat me at swords, and good fighters who loathed strategy. Are you either? He also has a lot of cool lines throughout the book, and damn, his relationship with Arren did not disappoint. He felt angry and betrayed, and he wanted to kill his former friend so badly. But he also couldn't help but still love him deeply because, well, you don't just stop caring just like that. It was easier to call Arren king. Despite Elo's anger, when he thought about Arren, he still saw him laughing at a joke at a campfire, losing a game with a smile. Arren, hungover, sleeping in his bed. And this is what I love about Friends to Enemies. It's this messed up web of complex emotions that you get out of it. And here it's on full display for our greatest pleasure. And damn, that scene at the end where he starts wondering if Arren feels as conflicted as he does about their fight. It's so tragically beautiful. And how he starts thinking that he'd rather Arren straight up hates him than feel nothing. Like, his biggest fear is not to be hated, but just to mean nothing for his friend. It's just gorgeous. And now I just really want to see him having to work with Arren after all of this. And I'm genuinely not sure how things will evolve between them. I could see this becoming an actual romance, or also just like coming back to a friendship. When it comes to Elo's love story, romance, and so on and so forth, I had the impression that there was going to be something potentially between Elo and Naya, because there were just a few scenes where it was a little bit flirty. And of course he had this thing with Kissen in book 1, which I thought was going to lead to something. Impossible to say with the content of this book because they barely saw each other. Just that when he sees Kissen at the end, he looks like filled with so much joy. It was like a pleasure to read. So I genuinely don't know. Arren also seems to be very possessive towards him at the end. And of course he's been obsessing over him throughout the whole book. And Elo also does use a little bit of romantic wording when it comes to Arren, so I could see it. I mean, personally, I would be happy with both friends to enemies to friends or friends to enemies to lovers. I'm happy with both. I'm just saying, I think I know which one Arren would prefer. Me, personally, I'll be happy regardless. Just don't let them stay enemies and I'll be fine. Oh, wait, no, don't kill them. That would be terrible. Friends or lovers is the only acceptable development here. Let's talk about Inara. Inara was pretty much the rebellious teen throughout the whole book, sulking at Elo because he wasn't trying to make her a child soldier. She just kind of always assumed that everyone saw her as a burden and she was really trying to prove herself. And I think the book did a good job at portraying her feelings. You as a reader just know she's wrong. She's pretty much portrayed as being wrong. But you always also kind of understand where she's coming from. So as a reader, I was never that angry with her. If anything, I felt sorry for her for not understanding how people felt around her. There's a great line from Skedi that sums her up quite nicely. How wearisome that Inara wanted to be both a rebellious grown-up and a petulant child at once. And yeah, that's exactly it. Like a teenager in her teenager crisis. Her friendship with Skedi was as tense as it was touching. She still hasn't fully forgiven him for that moment in book 1 where he attempted to take over her body, and she's also a bit short with him at times. Yet she still comes to him for comfort when she needs it, and she does start feeling a little bit jealous when other people appreciate him as a god. So I like the evolution of their relationship. I also love the moment near the end where she starts allying herself with other gods. It looked really badass, and it's a damn shame it didn't work out. And when she crumbles because she realizes that she got those gods killed, it's just so damn sad. I'm really curious to see how she is going to evolve now that the 2 women she thought were dead are actually not and are back into her life. I think that's going to be very interesting. A lot of her bitterness throughout this book came from her feeling of having lost them and having to learn how to live with it, or rather to live without them. So now that they're back, I'm wondering if she might struggle to have to take directions from them again. Her mother specifically, because Inara is just very different from the girl that her mother used to know. So that's definitely going to be a fascinating bit to explore right there. But let's talk about Skedi. Skedi's quest to discover more about his origins wasn't as explored as I thought it would be in this book, but to be fair, there was just so much to explore that adding more on top of that would have been a lot. And also I assume that we're kind of saving a big reveal for book 3. I don't know, I know it's purely cosmetic, but you know, the God of War Murtagh having antlers, the Skedi having antlers. It feels very superficial as a connection, but it is a connection, so I wonder if there's something there. And I'm super curious about his relationship with the god of Safe Haven, Yusuf, aka Inara's dad, apparently. That was something. Skedi is still just so cute. Seeing him trying to make up for the mistakes that he made in book 1 was just very sweet and satisfying. And he was just always there for Inara, unwavering, even when she was being a bit harsh with him. He was still there and trying to support her. Because she was in a lot of pain, so he was just trying to do his best for her, to comfort her. The Skedi was just trying his best through the whole book, and it really shows, and I love him for it. And I still desperately need a Skedi plushie. Who do I need to bother to make it happen? But now let's talk about Arren. Oh boy, Arren. What a journey. I loved having Arren's point of view. We didn't have that in book 1, obviously, because that would have ruined the final plot twist. And when I saw first in this book that we would get his point of view, I was just like, what the hell? I don't want the perspective of the best friend killer. But actually it was great. I loved it. I was kind of assuming that his perspective would be hyper-focused on trying to kill Elo now that he made his plan failed. But no. Not really, no. If anything, Arren felt very delusional when it came to Elo. He always thinks about him all the time. I don't think there is one perspective from Arren where he doesn't end up thinking about Elo. And there are times where it sounds like he knows what he's done. Hestra is talking to him and she's like, yeah, you're knight this and you're knight that. And Arren is just thinking, no, not my knight, not anymore. Hestra thought for a moment. Then, your safety means nothing. You kill what you love. That did hurt, he breathed out. Elo's face flashed again in his mind. The hurt, the betrayal. When Hestra had taken him to Blenraden in her twig form, he had seen it as clearly as if he had truly been standing before Elo and telling him he had to die. His knight, as Hestra called him, was now anything but, yet still he roamed so widely in his thoughts. Yeah, that he does. But then, there are some other times where he feels like he doesn't really realize what he's done to Elo, and he just kind of assumes that Elo will forgive him. or get angry at Elo for being in his way. And every time I was just like, sir, you did this. Gods. Elo had brought gods into this. Arren shook with anger. How dare he? Sir, who was it who first tried to sacrifice the other to a god? Huh? Who was it? Who was it who brought gods into this in the first place? Let's not hit ourselves here. Sit in a corner and think about what you did before you start thinking such nonsense again. But, all in all, I still, somehow, ended up feeling sorry for him. It was just like he completely refused to see exactly what he had done, especially when he realizes that he didn't need Seth. Then it's just like, oh good, I don't need to kill Elo anymore. I guess we can be friends again. I think you'll have to work a bit harder than this, Arren. But yeah, I guess I found it oddly sad. It almost reads like Arren is in so much pain that he becomes kind of delusional. Or maybe it's the god Sunbringer thing, I don't know. And while I know he put himself in this situation in the first place, it was just hard not to feel a bit sad for him whenever his point of view came up. Especially because during their argument in their fight scene at the end, it just is revealed that damn, Arren has been feeling betrayed and alone for quite some time. When Elo just retired from being a knight because of his trauma, and he left Arren alone with his own trauma to deal with, and also to rule alone with no one who really believed in him. And all these people just saw him as the queen's least favorite child. So he probably wasn't that respected as a king, and the only person that he's ever loved, being Elo, had just left him alone, traumatized and disrespected. So while that doesn't justify what he's done to Elo, and perhaps he should have just like tried, communicating, yeah, it's still sad to realize that, oh yeah, I understand why he would feel alone and betrayed as well. So yeah, not a good enough reason to try and have your best friend killed to become a god. But still, it was interesting to see his perspective on this. Also, him saving Elo from the archers at the end, that was brilliant. I loved it. I didn't see that coming. Also, there's a scene between Kissen and Arren where Arren says, "Save the king who would be a god." So now I'm kind of wondering if Arren will ever finish his transition into godhood. Like, is that what's going to happen to him in book 3? Is he going to become a proper god? Or is he going to remain immortal? I'm very curious. So I guess book 3 has a lot of opportunities for him to try and make things right with a lot of the people he's wronged. So I'm super hyped. Anyway, this has been long. Let's wrap this up before I start fusing with my chair. In conclusion, this book is beautiful. I love the characters from the bottom of my heart, and I just need to put my greasy little fingers on book 3 yesterday. So, do yourself a favor, treat yourself, go read it if you haven't. It's great. I can't wait to see where the journey takes us. I hope Kissen grows into the hero she's meant to be. I hope Elo and Arren struggle through their broken relationship before they are able to mend their friendship and just have a happy ending. I hope Skedi finds a home he's happy with. And I hope Inara gets to see her dad and finds her place in all of this. And I want a happy ending. Please, please let them all live. Anyway, that's it for Sunbringer. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more of my face. Thanks for tuning in, and continue to enjoy stories.